On Saturday, Donald Trump made a couple of visits to Mississippi's museums that opened, one on the history of the state of Mississippi, one on its civil rights. He was met by protesters. He was not there long. He gave a speech there that was not well received by many of the folks there. Here's some of what he had to say.
The Civil Rights Museum records the oppression, cruelty, and injustice inflicted on the African American community, the fight to end slavery, to break down Jim Crow, to end segregation, to gain the right to vote, and to achieve the sacred birthright of equality. Today, we strive to be worthy of their sacrifice. We pray for inspiration from their example. We want our country to be a place where every child from every background can grow up free from fear, innocent of hatred, and surrounded by love, opportunity, and hope.
Now, Trump took a private 30-minute tour through the museum, which covers Mississippi's fight for equality and justice. Afterwards, he read scripted remarks to a select group of attendees.
We refuse to give a photo opportunity to an individual who don't care about our voting rights and seek to suppress it at every point. We refuse to allow an individual to steal this wonderful thing of honoring individuals who sacrifice when they work so hard to ensure people had access to affordable health care, and he's seeking to undermine it at every turn.
Of course, that was Derek Johnson, folks. There, of course, the president and CEO of the NAACP, former state director of the Mississippi State Conference of the NAACP. There was a news conference they held along with Congressman Benny Thompson and others explaining why they were boycotting Trump's visit to the museum. Other protesters were outside, including actress Angelou Ellis, who has been protesting the inclusion of the Confederate flag in the state flag of Mississippi. Trump spoke at a private event inside. The major event was taking place outside. He did not speak there because they were afraid of those public protests. Joining us on the phone right now is Corey Wiggins. He's the executive director of the Mississippi State Conference of the NAACP. Corey, here's what is interesting. You hear Trump make these comments about voting. This is the person who has a fraudulent voter fraud commission. And so he is advancing, frankly, the inequality that the folks in that museum fought against. He is a modern day Ross Barnett.
You know, good morning, Roland. I mean, that was the whole thing for our perspective from NAACP, is that this president, his policies don't embody the values that were associated with the civil rights movement. When you look at not only rolling back or an active sort of strategy around voter suppression, but the dismantling of the Affordable Care Act, which so many folks here in Mississippi depend on, or even when you start to look at the policies or the work to weaken CFPB, which provides consumer protections for so many folks, as I heard you mention earlier, talking about housing discrimination, or even consumer protections.
And not only that, when you talk about the issue of police brutality, the position he has taken, that is all about law and order. Of course, when you talk about Mississippi, in its history, African Americans have always had to deal with that reality as well. I mean, you can go down the line, and this president has done nothing where African Americans can say he actually speaks to us in our interest. And so it was an affront to see him there. I was on MSNBC over the weekend where one Republican said that, well, we can start the conversation. I'm like, no, he should be having a different conversation in D.C. and not giving a weak, impotent speech in Mississippi.
We're rolling, and that's the thing. To come to Mississippi at that point, when there was an opportunity for this state and for this country to reflect upon those who were part of the movement here in Mississippi, for those who even made the ultimate sacrifice by giving their life in the movement, and to distract from that opportunity, it wasn't a good thing. It wasn't a good opportunity. It wasn't a good time for the president to visit. And that's something that we've stood firm on. But even as we think about this, right, it's an opportunity for us to really shift this conversation. And let's be clear, it's not even just about the president. It is also about the policies that the president represent that don't align with those values that so many, we know the names, Roland. We know Medgar Evers. We know Fannie Lou Hamer. We know Dr. Aaron E. Henry. But there are so many other folks that we don't know who were in communities each and every day working hard in the civil rights movement that we're just losing out of the opportunity to highlight.
What about also, again, Anjanou Ellis? We had her on the show on Friday, and she made it clear that for her it's also a problem walking through that museum and still seeing that flag with that Confederate symbol on that flag.
Yes, the Mississippi State Conference NAACP has been working for years and advocating for the removal of the state flag that still bears the Confederate emblem. And it's one of the things that we've been working for, things that we'll continue to work for. Our national president, Derek Johnson, was involved in that work, who's our former state president here here in Mississippi. Our current state president, Mr. Charles Hampton, have all been working to do that. And Roland, quite frankly, that's what we spent our time doing, the Mississippi NAACP, this weekend. We had a leadership meeting this weekend to talk about those efforts and other efforts to make this state, or overall this country, more fair, more just as it relates to issues around African Americans.
All right, then. Well, Corey, we surely appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Now I want to bring in my panel here. Jill Horn is the author, historian, Morris Chair of History and Afro-American Studies, University of Houston. Of course, we previously had Gerald on the show talking about his book, The Counter-Revolution of 1776, Slave Resistance and the Origins of the United States of America. So, Gerald, glad to have you on the show. Also, Ashton Woods, organizer of Black Lives Matter Houston. All right, first off, so let's talk about Trump being there. Again, all of these folks who say, well, it's important to have the president there to show respect. But of all people, this president, who frankly has done nothing when it comes to the issue folks care about, and in fact is endorsing and supporting things the very people in the museum fought against.
Well, as I saw it, Mr. Trump came to Mississippi because he was trying to bait the audience in Mississippi. From my point of view, he was hoping that there would be some sort of raucous protest, even a disruptive protest, that then he would use in order to show his audience that he was standing up to black people. It seems to me that it was a rank form of opportunism on Mr. Trump's part to show up in Mississippi.
Ashton?
There's a lot to unpackage there. To be honest with you, I agree. I totally agree. But I think I would go further in saying that he's antagonizing those of us who are marginalized, that he is taking advantage of the dog whistle, same thing as Reagan, where you speak the language of a racist, you get out there and you bring them in, but unfortunately for him, it's no longer working anymore because we're resisting that. And he needs to learn the hard way.
Well, and again, what jumps out at me is I don't want to hear this president talk about folks who are, of course, the central focus of the museum fighting for voting rights, when this very president is supporting voter suppression. He literally is operating with the same policies of Alabama and Mississippi, trying to keep black folks from voting with this fraudulent voter fraud commission. And so I don't want to hear that. I mean, and so I don't care if he's the president of the United States. I don't need your presence somewhere when you are doing the very things the folks in the museum fought against.
Well, it's not only that, but it's his appointment of federal judges. Underneath the radar, he's appointing a record number of federal district court judges, federal appellate court judges. There's a proposal now that's being debated amongst the Republicans actually to expand the number of federal court judges, which of course is allowable under the Constitution. I'm afraid what's happening now in the United States is that we've moved beyond the dog whistle stage. We've now moved to the mating call stage. That's the kind of appeal that Mr. Trump is making to the most reactionary segment of the U.S. electorate.
And what we're seeing as a result of that, we are seeing those individuals, again, who are opposing the very fundamental issues of civil rights, who are opposing equality. And then when you have folks like Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who does not care about the previous rules of the Senate. They don't care about the blue slip. They're tearing those things up. They blocked federal judge appointees of President Obama because they want to put in place a hard right agenda, and they know those judges will be there for 30, 40, some cases 50 years.
Yeah. Well, I want to backtrack a little bit. I think about the appointment of Jeff Sessions, and the policies he's pushing about voter suppression, and not only that, just the way we're fighting the war on drugs, so to speak, is going to be problematic. It is problematic. So what I would say is when you think about what Donald Trump had to say at that in his presence, it was very triggering for a lot of people, and I think that that's important to point out.
And Gerald, when you talk about this notion of resistance, the reality is black folks have been resisting oppression in this country for 398 years. And so what we're seeing today against Trump is no different than what we have seen since the moment 21 Africans arrived in 1619.
Well, it's not only that, but I think just a few days ago you had a classic case of Trumpism. On the one hand, he was retweeting Islamophobic videos, many of which were fraudulent. On the same day, the Republican caucus in the U.S. Senate was pushing through a massive giveaway to the 1%. That is to say, the Trump base gets bigotry, the Trump donors get tax cuts. And it's that toxic combination that is driving this country into the ditch.
Well, folks, of course, we make it perfectly clear in terms of the issues that we're going to oppose and speak out against. And the reality is we certainly stand with Congressman Benny Thompson and Congressman John Lewis, Anjanou Ellis, and others who have been opposing this president going to Mississippi. And so hopefully on that 30-minute tour, he gained something. But as I said on MSNBC on Saturday, I'm not interested in Trump talking to folks in Mississippi. Will he have the guts to sit down with civil rights leaders in the White House? Will he talk to folks about those present-day issues? Will he address any of those concerns? I doubt it very seriously. And of course, we're seeing his support of Roy Moore in Alabama as somebody who is absolutely against the interests of African Americans. And so talk is cheap. And frankly, Trump's presence at the opening of that Mississippi museum, Civil Rights Museum, certainly tarnished that day and was really a waste of taxpayer dollars. He should just spend his time going to Mar-a-Lago in Florida, because that was a waste.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no. That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV One.